Hi, and welcome to this lecture on urbanization. The first thing we'll do in this lecture is introduce urbanization by examining historical trends and projections into the future, both for Canada and for the world. Secondly, we'll provide an overview of the main sociological perspectives on urbanization. What we are looking at here is the great migration of Canadians from the country to the city. At the dawn of the 20th century, about 1/3 of Canadians were city dwellers. The majority lived in rural settings. By the first few years of the 21st century, we are predominantly an urban nation, with less than 20% of our population still living in rural settings. This is why urbanization, its potential as well as its pitfalls, has become one of the dominant concerns of Canadian sociologists. If we look at urbanization globally, the same trend of out-migration from the countryside is what strikes us first. In fact, as of about May 2007, more people in the world are living in cities than are living in rural areas. Looking a little more closely at this chart, we note another dramatic trend, and that is the explosive growth of urban populations in the developing or industrialized world, the green line on this chart. One way or another, many of the emerging problems that will face us in the future will be urban in nature, and those issues will be most pronounced in the developing world. Which brings us to the concept of megacities, usually defined as cities with a population larger than 10 million people. About 100 years ago, 9 of the 10 largest cities in the world were in industrialized Europe or the United States. Flash forward to the year 2025, all of the world's 10 largest cities will be in excess of 20 million people, and all but one of them will be in the so-called developing world. To get more insight on the megacity phenomenon, check out the short video in this week's folder on the rise of the megacity. In this seminar, we will take a closer look at the challenges of megacity urbanization. Within the history of sociology, there are some important reasons why Chicago became one of the first large cities studied by sociologists. First of all, Chicago grew explosively in the latter half of the 19th century and in the early years of the 20th, fueled partly by Chicago's role as an industrial hub and partly by its role as a destination for African Americans fleeing the oppression and grinding poverty of the American South. Chicago's rapid growth created a lot of wealth, but was also behind an array of social problems. For sociologists at the University of Chicago, their home city became a laboratory for uncovering the dynamics and dysfunctions of urbanization. Hence the birth of what came to be known as the Chicago School, and shaped in its early years by Professor Robert Park. The main contribution of the Chicago School was the urban ecology model, which looked at processes of urbanization through the lens of biology and ecology. The result was a vision of how cities evolve and become more complex, how different groups migrate from one place to another over time, and how cities became spatially differentiated into different zones. Here we see a graphic representation of something called concentric zone theory. And by the way, this particular map is based on Chicago. The importance of this theory is its prediction, largely mistaken, as we have come to see, that the downtown core of a large city would eventually deteriorate as wealth migrated outwards. To be fair, this idea does hold true for some American cities. Detroit comes to mind immediately. But for many others, and for most larger Canadian cities, downtown cores are places of gentrification and vibrant renewal. There are other criticisms of the Chicago School, but this is the main one. Post-Chicago School, sociologists have come up with different approaches to studying urbanization, seeking to avoid, in particular, the problems that come along with assuming that cities behave like natural organisms. There is a lot of interest in the close observation of group and individual behavior in urban settings, giving rise to the idea of urban anthropology or urban ethnography. There is also something called the new urban sociology, influenced by conflict theory, which places the study of urban space within the context of capitalism, seeing urban space as a set of commodities in a marketplace driven by power and profit. One important focus of current research is the impact of globalization on modern cities. Another related phenomenon is that of the revisioning and revitalization of downtown cores. Thanks for listening into this lecture. Make sure you check out this week's close-up mini lecture on cities through history.